Greetings. So I hadn't really thought about it that black-eyed peas come from a plant. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like, right? Okay. Black-eyed peas, also known as goat peas or southern peas, are a small cream-colored kidney-shaped legume with a black spot on their inner curve. So I'm saying if it was a actual animal, like let's just play imagination for a minute. If an animal could evolve from a specific type of plant, what I'm getting is like pandas or skunks or orcas, for example. Yeah, yeah. I'm a bee. Black-eyed peas. I just feel this energy of like not being willing to be held back. You know when you don't want to be held back? Like you don't want to be boxed, you don't want to be beaten, you don't want to be bruised. There's a movie called Black and Blue out there. I've never seen it because I don't want to. I'm grateful that I don't have to live that. So anyway, this is the base of the reading. It's just a quick little prerequisite. Also, we're going to get a motherhood card from the plant deck to see how this is going to, pan out. How this is going to pan out. So I'm going to read a section of the light eaters in just a moment. Ooh. So this is dill in reverse, number 10. So dilly dilly-o. Yeah, there's bell peppers in the reverse. So I feel like if you're allergic to something, you're just not gonna eat it. Okay. If you are tired of the lifestyle that leads to being beat 2 ways from Sunday, twice, thrice, however many times you've been, beat down. Oh, there's a tomato. And there's the honey. All of that just came out in the reverse. So I think it's time to do our reading. We're going to start on yeah, page 89. It was the first time I met Simon Gilroy. He was wearing a bright blue Hawaiian shirt covered in green philodendron leaves. Botanists love theme shirts. His bright white hair was parted down the center and lay neatly over each shoulder, nearly reaching his waist. Gilroy, who is British and given to small jokes, studied in the 1980s in Edinburgh University under Anthony Trevallis. Rewind. Okay, so rewind. You might need to go watch an earlier section of this if you're not familiar with the book. Plants physiologist. The pair were convinced for decades that electricity moved in a wave pattern across the plant body. I'm sorry, I just had to take a moment. Pair were convinced for decades. Yeah, the pair were convinced for decades that electricity moved in a wave pattern across the plant body. They both felt it made sense. Information moved in a wave in so many other forms of life, they just didn't yet have the technology to prove it. In recent years, Trevallis had turned decidedly towards using provocative language to talk about plants, aligning himself in the process with a group of botanists who called themselves plant neurobiologists, publishing papers and books laying out scientific arguments in favor of plant intelligence and consciousness. Gilroy himself is more circumspect, unwilling to talk about either of those things, but the two still work together. Most recently, they have developed a theory of agency for plants. Gilroy was quick to remind me that he was talking strictly about biological agency, not implying intention in a thoughts and feelings sense. I nodded and he continued. Plants in the time frame we think of animals operating do very similar things to animals as far as information processing, thus the prerequisite to understanding the whole big picture, that whole entire thing. They make very complicated calculations about the world around them. It would be incredibly impressive if a human being did a sort of information processing and came to the output that the plants came to. Plants make their lives work in the environment they find themselves in. That, for him, is proof of their agency. Still, the proof is through inference rather than understanding the mechanisms. I was about to say interference. Yeah, when you feel, and this will actually just come out in the next couple pages. I actually already read ahead a little bit to do my prerequisite work for myself. When you get down to the machinery that allows those calculations to occur, we don't have the luxury of going, it's neurons in our brain, Gilroy said. The question is, where is the information processing? Gilroy's work was beginning to allow us to watch it happen. But the moment we don't know how it works, observation and understanding often start out very far apart. So I think if you've never seen the movie The Happening, it's actually a horror movie, but it's about nature deciding that we as an individual species are no longer, like we as human beings are no longer that helpful. So the trees start conferring. Yes, fir trees included. Fir trees included. When Gilroy is not in his lab, he is teaching the university's introductory biology course to over 900 undergraduates per semester. The class covers all the basics with a distinctly plant-forward flair. When he gets to the great oxygenation event, it's like an event horizon, more or less like the apocalypse. The long period in which the Earth's atmosphere transitioned away from being a suffocating cage of carbon dioxide and oxygen-dominated haven, he makes sure one crucial detail sinks in. Plants did that. They made the terrestrial world a habitable place for other forms of life to arise, and eventually to be able to breathe. Without them, animal life as we know it would not even have the faintest shot. They wouldn't stand a chance at clambering into the evolutionary treadmill. Our cells would never have formed. Things like mitochondria wouldn't work in the ancestral environment, meaning no matter how far we had evolved until that point, there was really nothing that was going to help us out. One of the things I noticed today about language, I was today years old when I figured out that laughter is a word that a lot of people see as very euphoric, right? However, if you put an S in front of the word laughter, just put an S right in front of it, you're now talking about slaughter. Something that minute in the genome, the human, plant, animal genome, can actually completely throw off the chain of events as we know them. Our cells would never have formed things like mitochondria. It wouldn't have worked in the ancestral environment. The basic view of Darwinian evolution is this: a living organism goes through a wide array of random mutations until something works, and then it keeps it. And then it keeps it. Yeah. It's like, that actually did work, and so I'm going to keep on going, right? That imagines a rather passive view of how life forms, but plants certainly had a hand in their own evolution and the evolution of the environment. That, for Gilroy, seems to be the central point. Plants have designed the world around them to suit their needs. Why don't we get that? Why wouldn't we wouldn't want to be here were it not for them? Yeah, why wouldn't we want to be here unless plants were here, basically? The idea that they lack agency is absurd once you have that awareness. You wouldn't have animals to eat, interact with, derive pharmaceutical meaning from, derive any type of medical advancement in terms of simple observation skills. None of that would happen because they wouldn't have any plants to survive off of. And that is effectively, unless you're like a vegetarian, about half of what's supposed to be a nutritious diet. Diet tribe. The basic view of Darwinian evolution is this: a living organism goes through a wide array of random mutations until something works. That, for Gilroy, seems to be the central point. I'm skipping. The idea that they lack agency is absurd once you have that awareness. Unlocking certain mysteries would help us understand how plants process so much information so expertly. Gilroy leads a plant science lab that, among other things, regularly sends baby plants to the International Space Station and trains astronauts on how to tend the seedlings so that he can study the impact of microgravity on their root. How plants perceive gravity is a persistent mystery in botany. It's like Mystique. You've ever seen X-Men? I don't really know. No one quite knows how they do it. But in humans and many other animals, the way we perceive gravity is understood. In our inner ear, we have canals angled at 90 degrees to each other. The canals are lined with trigger hairs, much like those inside a Venus flytrap. The canals are also full of liquid in which crystals are suspended, like glitter in a snow globe. As we bend or turn, those crystals fall down with gravity, settling into some of the trigger hairs. The hairs bend under the weight like a pin struck by a pinball, sending electrical signals to our brain which tells us which direction is down. If you spin around and stop and the world seems to be moving, it's because the fluid in those canals is still moving, as if the snow globe was given a good shake. The pinballs are hitting all the wrong pins. So I don't know if you understand the gravity of the situation, like when you're drunk or something. The pinballs are hitting all the wrong pins. The spinning will stop when the ear confetti settles again. Ear. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is your spatial perception just kind of reverses. That's why gravity is such a force to be reckoned with. If you've never heard John Mayer, Gravity, decent song. The spinning will stop when the ear confetti settles again, but the key here is that the electrical signal is sent to our brain. Only then does that information turn into something our bodies understand. It's a beautiful machine, and we know how the machine works, Gilroy says of our inner ear. Plants have a very similar system. Scientists have found falling granules within their cells, just like the ones in our inner ear. There's an asterisk. So, plants have a very similar system. Scientists have found falling granules within their cells, just like the ones in our inner ear, but made out of starch instead of ours, which were made out of calcium. If you've got a calcified pineal gland, you cannot really perceive the minute details of life. And even if you were to perceive them, you probably wouldn't link them together with other aspects of the world, at least not very automatically as it comes to electrical impulse. But then we don't know what happens. There are no hairs. There are no systems to tell you the machines that do the measurement. After the crystal falls, no one knows what happens next. It's like taking a nap in the sun where you're really hot, but you've never seen snow, so you couldn't even imagine how you could cool yourself off with simply a thought, right? What gets triggered and where does the signal from the trigger go? It is transmitted through electrical impulses. It's still a black box. Without a trigger, the mechanics of how the plant senses those falling granules are a mystery. And without a brain, one might expect the information to ricochet around the plant, never arriving at any decision center that could make heads or tails of it, so to speak. So you know how in The Wizard of Oz, if I only had a brain. Okay, one wants a brain, one wants a heart, one wants a way home from Auntie M. They all want something. One wants some oil. Want. They can't figure out, mysteriously enough, how to create that own electrical impulse for themselves. I don't know why it's so mystifying. It's like being lost in the poppy seed field when the gravity of the situation has given you a good spin. Some people seem to be completely stupefied when it comes to this mechanism that we speak of. Despite this, the plant is clearly processing the up-down information to decide how to grow. Yeah, like who would think that you would just click your heels together and make a wish? That's somewhere over the rainbow. Plant roots in general grow down and shoots in general grow up. It's like shoots and ladders or snakes and ladders, okay? If you tip a plant over, it will eventually start growing upward again. They are clearly sensing gravity. Plus, they're integrating that information into the information that they've already gathered. Hunter-gatherer kind of mechanism going on. We're talking about sapien. From various other aspects of their immediate surroundings, obstacles, neighbors, and the direction of the light, the temperature of the soil. But how? So far, no one knows. And not for want of trying, Gilroy says. There are really very, very clear researchers who have done what you would think would solve it. These are very clever experiments, but we have never found it. We have never found it. That is quite literally the essence of the entire question of plant intelligence. How does something without a brain coordinate a response to any stimuli at all? How does information about the world get integrated, triaged by importance, and translated into action and benefit the plant? How can the plant sense its world at all without a centralized place to parse all that information? Three main questions being thrown about. A few years ago, Gilroy and Toyota thought they'd have a go at that question. Toyota thought that if there was an electrical trigger associated with gravity sensing, like the kind found in animal ears, it would probably be accompanied by a burst of calcium. Calcium is not, in itself, a form of information. It's basically the footprint left behind by electricity. And we could talk about carbon footprint. Your teeth are made out of calcium and so are your bones. So that's a carbon footprint that kind of brings things full circle. So does your trash. Makes a carbon footprint. It's basically the footprint left behind by electricity, a kind of second messenger. In animals, calcium levels increase in a cell when ion channels open. There's a university called Ions University, by the way. Quite interesting. They do theoretical, philosophical, quantum field studies. Ion channels open up when electricity is passing through. So calcium shows up in a cell directly after the electricity does. They did mention that this is kind of black box-ish. There is just interestingly enough, these are side facts that probably are completely irrelevant, but there is a wine called Black Box. And if you were to look at Malaysia Flight 370, the electrical, or I guess it's an electricity conference that was held, was part of the mass conspiracy about why and how that plane disappeared. The third piece of information that I am about to offer is piezoelectricity, which I'll let you go look up by yourself. The technology for visualizing calcium in plant cells was dreamed up years ago. It worked like this. Researchers took the gene responsible for making green fluorescent proteins out of a species of jellyfish. By the way, don't step on those on the beach. They're very painful. That grow naturally in dark water and engineered it to be responsive to calcium. They then inserted the gene into the chromosome of a plant, the part of the cell responsible for passing genetics on to the next generation. Gene therapy. It's like Gene in X-Men or Xavier. They then inserted the gene into the chromosome of the plant, the part of the cell responsible for passing genetics on to the next generation. When a gene is inserted into the chromosome, it duplicates itself in every cell of that organism's offspring. It's like a green day is what it sounds like to me. That means that every future seed the plant produces will make a baby plant with that capacity to glow green already built into each of its cells. Intriguingly, virtually all organisms have the capacity to run the same bit of jellyfish DNA. The genetic code in the jellyfish is universal, explained Gilroy. You can take the code and put it into any other organism you want, and it will work the same. Let me read that again. You can take the code and put it into any other organism you want, and it will work the same. Even people? I pictured a person with a faint green glow coursing through their musculature. It's like the Flash or the Green Goblin. Or, beaches with all types of bioluminescent plant and animal life strewn across it. Like we do with trash at the moment, unfortunately, but a girl can wish. A girl can definitely hope. Yeah, a girl can wish and hope and pray. Anyway, by now people have been improving on these green fluorescent proteins for a generation, changing them to make them glow brighter when activated, and they have recently gotten very good. At the same time, microscopes became available with a large enough field of view to look at a whole plant at once, and a camera sensitive enough to detect even relatively weak fluorescence. Like the floor and the mana and the essence all together. It was a matter of technology finally catching up to ideas scientists had wanted to test out for years. It was just fantastic, Gilroy says. Gilroy and Toyota thought the fluorescent proteins might be a perfect way to study the mystery of gravity. Perhaps they could watch where the signal went by observing the fluorescent path. But before they tried to apply it to the big gravity question, they thought they should have a control. Every science project probably should have a control. The thing is, I don't know if animal testing is very humane, and I know human testing is not humane. So if we're going to test it on animals, I'll have to refer you back to a different chapter in the back of, I think it was chapter 3. Might have been the end of chapter 2. I can't really recall at this point. It was 2 or 3. I can't remember. But they're talking about how if you honor the electrical impulses sent by root systems underground from a plant, as you would the need for some animals to be part of a pack or part of a group or a school of fish, the communication amongst those roots are similarly valuable. So when you pot a plant, it's kind of like you're cutting it off from the rest of its essential nutrients. Nutrients meaning communications, electrical or otherwise. Kind of makes you feel sad if you've got any type of house plant. Anyway, but before they tried to apply it to the big gravity question, they thought they should have a control to make sure the system was working, something that would easily make calcium move around. Wounding is sure to cause a calcium signal, Gilroy told Toyota. Scientists already determined that plants will produce an immediate spike of electricity at the place where they've been cut, chewed, or otherwise damaged. Let me read that again because it's kind of important. It's what I was just talking about. Scientists already determined, so we know for a fact, that plants will produce an immediate spike, an electrical one, at the place where they've been cut, chewed, or otherwise damaged. So Toyota went down to the microscope to cut some leaves, expecting to see a little flurry of calcium in the same spot as the cut. Within minutes, he came running back up to the office. "You've got to see this," Toyota said. "I think we're going to work on wounding." I don't know if you've heard K-Camp cut her off, but it's kind of like taking your hippocampus and snipping, taking a slice of this and a chop of that and just annihilating things. Annihilating things. And it's on purpose. Like, let me just keep reading because they do address how cruel that is. A wave of green was moving across the plant from the place where Toyota had cut the leaf. The imprint of the cut radiated outward until the calcium had coursed through the whole body. The visual was clear, stunning. Anyone could understand it. One way or another, the whole plant was being notified of the wound. If you're a plant biologist, you know plants respond in milliseconds. That is not a controversial thing at all. That is not a controversial thing at all. You absolutely know that if you put a stimulus on a plant, you know the biochemistry is changing instantaneously, Gilroy said. But to be able to put it in a way that non-biologists could see it happen is a big output. To remind everyone that all living beings respond very quickly to the world around them, because if they don't, they aren't going to be living for very long. They could now see in real time how incredibly sensitive plants were to touch of any kind. After leaving a plant undisturbed for a long time, even bumping the table a plant sat on could send a shiver of green coursing through it. Toyota took a plastic pipette tip from the lab and wrote the word touch across the leaf. Luminous green waves reverberated outward from the shape of the word. Gilroy later used the video of this moment in the microscope as a final slide in a presentation right before his contact info so that the slide read, "Keep in touch." You know how people just use cards? Like business cards to say like, "Keep in touch, here's my info," or Facebook me or Google me or whatever. Anyway. On a freezing day in December, I arrived in Wisconsin to see the green reverberation for myself. I find Gilroy in his office, this time wearing a blazing orange Hawaiian shirt decorated with a surfboard motif. Surfboard. Okay. Anyway, I just had to add that. Part. It is minus 12 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Yeah, if you've never seen Fahrenheit 9/11, since we're talking about black box information, Gilroy takes me into his lab where Jessica Fernandez, a molecular biologist on his team, brings us a flat of young tobacco and Arabidopsis plants that she reared herself, especially for my visit.